Welcome to today's story. My name is Veronica Vale, and I'm 69 years old. I built a financial advisory firm from scratch, survived 2 recessions, and balanced more broken marriages and bankruptcies than I care to count. Numbers, I understood. People, not always. I used to believe that after 40 years of hard work, retirement would finally mean peace. Turns out, peace can be poisoned. The night it happened, I was standing in my kitchen, my marble kitchen to be precise, listening to the faint hum of jazz from the living room. Guests were laughing, champagne was flowing, and the band had just started playing Fly Me to the Moon. It should have been the perfect evening. Until I heard the glass hit the floor. I turned just in time to see Crystal, my daughter-in-law, collapse near the dessert table. Her body stiffened, her hands curled, and a sound escaped her throat I will never forget. The champagne flute rolled away, spinning once before stopping at my feet. Well, I remember saying quietly that wasn't supposed to happen, at least not to her. 2 hours earlier. If you've ever sold the company you built from nothing, you'll understand the strange mix of pride and emptiness that follows. I'd signed the last papers that morning. Vale Financial Advisory sold for $24 million. Enough to buy peace, or apparently poison. My son Ethan had insisted on throwing me a retirement party. "Mom, you deserve it." He'd said, those practiced, kind eyes of his doing their usual dance. "Let us handle everything. You just relax." And by us, he meant his wife, Crystal. Crystal, who complained when she had to fold laundry, was suddenly Martha Stewart incarnate, arranging flowers, polishing silverware, and barking orders at the caterer, like she was running the Ritz. Even the neighbors noticed. "She's really going all out," Mrs. Pennington whispered to me. "Yes," I said, smiling, "it's almost suspicious." The house looked stunning. Gold balloons, jazz band in the corner, crystal glasses lined up like soldiers ready for inspection. About 30 people, colleagues, old clients, a few relatives filled the living room. I remember thinking how lucky I was. Then I noticed Lily, my granddaughter. Lily was 20, bright, studying business at NYU and lately distant. The kind of distance that doesn't come from youth, but from secrets. She kept checking her phone, glancing around, then walking toward the drinks table. I saw her reach into her purse and pull out a tiny vial. She looked both careful and terrified, like someone performing a science experiment she didn't fully understand. She tilted it, releasing a few drops into a champagne glass. Not just any glass, the one with the small chip on the rim, the one I always used at family events. For a second, I froze. Every instinct in me screamed, "Do something." But then another thought cut through the panic, an accountant's instinct. Not a mother's. When you catch someone cooking the books, you don't shout. You let the numbers hang them quietly. So I smiled. I nodded politely at whoever was talking to me about retirement travel plans, pretending nothing was wrong. Then I waited. Lily placed the glass on the tray, stepped back, and exhaled. Her hands trembled. She didn't notice me watching. I excused myself, walked to the bar, and lifted the glass with the chipped rim. I admired the bubbles for a moment, tiny, perfect, innocent. Then I looked at Crystal, who was busy showing off her new diamond bracelet to the neighbors. Her own glass sat half empty beside her purse. I switched them, quietly, smoothly, like moving a rook in a chess game. No one noticed. 10 minutes later, the toast began. Ethan raised his glass. "To Mom, the sharpest mind in finance and the toughest woman we know," everyone clapped. Crystal smiled, dazzling and artificial. I raised my glass but didn't drink. Across the room, I saw Lily biting her lip. Her eyes flicked from me to Crystal and back. She looked pale. Guilt looks different on everyone, but on her, it looked like a storm behind a polite smile. Then Crystal laughed, threw her head back, and took a long sip. She was mid-sentence, something about our family being a legacy of love and loyalty, when her voice cracked. Her eyes widened. The glass slipped. The sound of crystal hitting marble is sharp, almost musical. Then came the screaming. Guests rushed forward. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Lily's phone clattered to the floor as she knelt beside her mother. Ethan froze, mouth open, face drained of color. I remember kneeling, too pretending confusion, concern. My hand rested gently on Crystal's shoulder as foam gathered at the corner of her lips. Inside, I was calm, observing, calculating. The paramedics arrived fast. Our neighborhood is good at emergencies. They worked over her while guests whispered theories: allergic reaction, low blood sugar, stress. Lily stood shaking mascara, streaking her cheeks. When a paramedic asked if Crystal had eaten anything unusual, Lily stammered, "And no, just champagne." I met her eyes. For a split second, she knew that I knew, and I smiled kindly, almost grandmotherly. Hours later, after the guests had left and the floors had been cleaned, I poured myself a real drink. A new bottle, unopened, poured into a clean glass. I sat at my desk, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the house. The party photos were already flooding social media, smiling faces, twinkling lights, captions like cheers to new beginnings. Funny how true that was. I thought about Lily's shaking hands, about Ethan's nervous smiles, about Crystal's sudden generosity in hosting, and about that little vial, what was in it, where it came from, who told her to use it. I've spent my life spotting fraud. Most scams start with a gift, a helping hand, a family member who says, "You deserve to rest, Mom." I took a sip of champagne and let the bubbles settle. If they wanted a performance, they were going to get one. Because the thing about numbers, about poison, about people, you can hide them for a while, but eventually, the math catches up. When I finally went to bed that night, I left the chipped champagne glass on the counter, a reminder. In finance, we call that a red flag. In family, we call it a holiday gathering. And so began my retirement. Not the peaceful kind, the investigative kind. Next time someone tells you to relax and enjoy yourself, remember sometimes the toast isn't to your health, it's to your disappearance. The ambulance lights were still flashing outside as they took Crystal away. Guests slowly backed down the steps, their faces a mix of shock and morbid curiosity. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, my expression calm enough that anyone watching might have thought I was trying not to faint, but in truth, I was simply observing. People reveal their true nature in chaos. Ethan came running, his face, pale tie, crooked hands trembling. "Mom, what just happened?" I looked at my son, 42 years old, tall, once praised for having the face of someone trustworthy. Now that same face avoided my eyes. "Probably a food reaction," said the officer taking notes, "or maybe an allergic reaction to a drink." I nodded gently. Yes, allergies. They always show up at perfect family gatherings. He gave a nervous chuckle and moved on writing possible food reaction in his report. I didn't object. There was no need to rush the truth when the culprit still didn't know they'd been caught. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the kitchen blinds, thin and cold. The house was strangely quiet after last night's chaos. No laughter, no music, only the faint scent of disinfectant lingering on the marble floor where Crystal had fallen. I poured myself a cup of coffee and took small sips, bitter just how I liked it. The kind of bitterness that's honest, not the kind that pretends to be sweet like some people in my family. The doorbell rang at 8. I checked the camera, Ethan holding a box of pastries. I smiled faintly. When a son who never wakes up before 10 shows up early with baked goods, something's wrong. I opened the door. "Mom, I brought pastries from that shop you like," he said, forcing a smile. "Pastries." I glanced at the box. "You know the last time you brought carbs into this house, you needed money." Ethan laughed awkwardly. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Last night was awful." "It was," I said, pouring him some coffee. "But at least everyone's safe, especially your wife." He looked down, spinning his cup between his hands. I said nothing, just watched. As a finance professional, I had a skill I called listening with your eyes. When people lie, they look at their hands, not at you. Ethan was looking at his hands. I sat across from him, peeling apart the layers of a croissant. "Coffee?" I asked. "I'll have some," he said quietly. I poured him a small amount, then waited. In silence, you hear more truth than in any confession. "Mom," he finally said, "the police think it was food-related. Crystal's still at the hospital. They said it might be a reaction to her medication." I nodded. Doctors are clever. They always find a way to keep everyone calm. I don't understand what happened." Ethan sighed. "No one does," I said. "But that doesn't mean no one knows." He looked at me, trying to gauge how much I knew. I met his gaze evenly, taking another slow sip. Part of me wanted to believe he was innocent, but the rest, the part that had guided me through 40 years of business, whispered, "Never trust anyone with inheritance rights." Mom Ethan said after a pause, "Lily, she's worried you might have misunderstood." "Misunderstood what I asked. She said you looked at her strangely last night. She's scared you think she was involved." I set my cup down and locked eyes with him. A 20-year-old girl, smart, composed, suddenly trembling so hard she spills her drink. "Tell me, Ethan, what exactly am I misunderstanding?" He blinked. "Mom, please don't doubt Lily. She'd never hurt anyone." I smiled faintly. "That's what worries me the most, son. People who never hurt anyone are the ones you should always watch." The air went still. Ethan forced a weak laugh, trying to change the subject. "Did you sleep okay? I was afraid you'd be shaken up." "Better than you think," I said. "When you've lived long enough, you learn to tell who's truly shaken and who's pretending." He frowned slightly, unsure how to respond. When Ethan finally left, I watched his car pull away, then close the door behind him. For a moment, I stood in silence, wondering when my son started looking at me like a number waiting to be settled. Maybe it was the day I sold my company, traded a lifetime of work for $24 million. Money doesn't just change the one who receives it. It exposes everyone around it. On the kitchen counter, the pastry box was still open. I stared at the croissants, golden, flaky, buttery, but didn't touch them. In my head, one thought repeated itself. Everything sweet deserves an audit. Around noon, the hospital called. The doctor's voice was polite, rehearsed. "Mrs. Vale Crystal's condition is stable. It seems to have been a mild reaction to her drink. We didn't find any toxins, but we'll keep her under observation." I thanked him, but inside I laughed. Not detected doesn't mean not present. I knew what I saw: the vial, the droplets, Lily's anxious eyes. That wasn't imagination. I wrote everything down, time caller, exact words, an old habit from my working days. No one knew that notebook would later become what police called supplemental evidence. That afternoon, Lily texted me, "Grandma, Mom's feeling better. I'm so sorry if I worried you. I just want you to know I love you. Too perfect, too fast." I read it twice before replying, "Love is action, not a message, dear." Then I set the phone down and reopened the kitchen security footage. The scene from last night appeared: people laughing, glasses, clinking lights, shimmering. Then the moment Crystal fell, the frame shook slightly. The camera caught Lily's heels as she stepped back, head down. I paused and zoomed in. Under the serving table, something glinted: a tiny glass vial. I smiled thinly. Technology was wonderful. It never misunderstood like humans do. That evening I had dinner alone. Truly alone. No guests, no speeches. Just me, a salad, and candlelight. I told myself from now on I'll treat them the way I treat any client showing signs of fraud. Observe, document, and act when the evidence is complete. Before bed, I opened the window and looked out at the quiet street. In the reflection, my face looked older, but not weaker. If anything, sharper. I remembered Ethan's words, "Lily would never hurt you." I smiled to myself. That I whispered is exactly what scares me most. I never believed in fate, but the next morning as I stepped out to get the newspaper, a gray security van pulled up in front of my house. A young man in a Home Guard security uniform got out, smiling politely. "Mrs. Vale. You ordered an installation package last week, right? I didn't remember ordering anything, but I understood immediately. This was the perfect excuse at the perfect time." "Oh yes," I said calmly. "I need those. There have been a lot of porch pirates around here lately." He nodded and began unloading equipment. Across the street, my neighbor Mrs. Pennington was watering her flowers. I raised my voice just enough for both of them to hear. "Careful, Mrs. Pennington. Those porch pirates are getting bold these days." She laughed. "Who would dare steal from you, Veronica?" I replied lightly. "Oh, people only need enough greed to try." 3 hours later, my house had become a web of electronic eyes. Front door, kitchen, living room, even the small corner by the wine cabinet, every spot had a camera. I signed the receipt, handed the technicians yesterday's box of croissants, and wished them a good afternoon. One of them asked jokingly, "So, what did you do before retirement, ma'am?" I smiled. I was an auditor. My job was to find errors before errors found me. When the door closed, the house fell silent again. Soft light filtered through the curtains spreading across the polished wood floor. I walked to the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and connected to the new system. A dozen camera windows appeared different angles of the same house I'd lived in for 30 years. Strange how with new eyes, familiar things start to look suspicious. I opened the recording from the night of the party, started the playback slow, laughter, clinking glasses, jazz music. I heard my own voice calm and cheerful making a toast as the band played The Girl from Ipanema. Then I spoke to Alexa, my voice husky but steady with irony. "Alexa, show me the champagne table." 7:42 p.m. The frame changed. The table gleamed under golden light, the reflections dancing like tiny knives. And there on the left side of the screen was Lily. She looked around nervously, shoulders trembling, then bent down toward her purse. I pressed pause, breathed in, then pressed play again. She took out a small vial no bigger than my thumb. The camera wobbled slightly, but it was enough. I saw her drip a few drops into the champagne glass, the one with the small chip on its rim. My glass. "Show me." "Zoom in," I said quietly. No need to raise my voice. Calm authority works better than panic. The screen enlarged. The glass shimmered, light bouncing off it like the edge of a blade. Seconds later, Crystal appeared in the frame, stepping close to whisper something in Lily's ear. I could read her lips clearly. "Now drink." Then both of them looked toward me before Lily nodded, smiled, and walked away. I stopped the video. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Only the ticking clock filled the room, a reminder that every second carries legal weight. I leaned back, arms crossed. If this were a financial audit, I already had 80% of the evidence. But when the perpetrators are family, the hardest part isn't proving guilt, it's surviving betrayal. Around noon, Mrs. Pennington dropped by with a tray of apple pie. "I heard your daughter-in-law's in the hospital." "Poor thing," she said. I accepted the pie, smiling faintly. "Poor who, Mrs. Pennington?" She laughed awkwardly. "Oh, I meant both of them, of course. You must be worried." "Not really," I said lightly. "I only worry about people who deserve it." I knew I sounded sharp, but honesty is a luxury I've paid dearly for. By afternoon, I was back at my desk, scrolling through the footage again. 7:45 p.m. The sound of glasses clinking. In one angle, I saw myself talking with an old friend near the piano. Behind me, Crystal stood near the table. Lily was gone. Crystal glanced in my direction, reached for a glass, and set it down. Pause. Zoom. The same chipped rim. My glass. I rewound. Yes, the chip had been there from the start. It was my personal glass, the one I always used out of habit. No one else would have noticed. But Lily had. She had chosen it deliberately, like signing her name on a death contract. I exhaled slowly. No fear, no rage, just clarity, the kind auditors call a moment of proof. I whispered almost to myself, "So, it was meant for me." The words floated in the quiet air, sounding both resigned and resolved. A part of me wanted to cry, but tears were a wasteful expense. If my life had been valued at $24 million, the least I could do was act like someone protecting her assets. I saved the entire recording, copied it to an external drive, and locked it in my safe. Then I opened my laptop and created a new folder, Project Champagne. File 1, Evidence way on MP4. File 2, Motive, pending.docx. That's how I began my investigation, not with fear, but with structure. Structure always beats emotion. I'd seen too many elderly people lose everything because they thought my children would never go that far. I knew better. People can always go farther. That night, as I took the trash out, headlights flashed across the driveway. A familiar sedan, the one belonging to Ethan. But he didn't get out. He just sat there watching the front door, then drove away. I stood in the dark, the wind biting against my skin. Good, I thought. Let them worry. People only panic when their plan hasn't worked yet. When I went back inside, the house greeted me with silence and the faint hum of electronics. Every camera blinked softly, each one a quiet, loyal witness. I felt safer now, but also different. My home no longer just protected me, it observed, it remembered, just like I did. Before bed, I whispered, "Alexa, turn off the lights." The house dimmed slowly until only the blue glow of the monitor remained. I stared into it. In the reflection, my face looked calm, sharp, no longer the face of a harmless retiree. I smiled faintly. "Well then," I said softly, "let's see how many lies survive under these eyes." I switched off the monitor. Outside, the wind hissed through the trees, carrying a sound that almost resembled a sigh. But my house was different now. It wasn't just a home, it was a witness. And from now on, it would watch everyone frame by frame, minute by minute, word by word. St. Jude's Hospital always smelled like a mixture of antiseptic stale coffee and fear. I'd been there many times when Ethan broke his arm at 10, when Lily caught the flu, and now when Crystal lay there paler than the sheets beneath her. The nurse recognized me. "You're the mother-in-law, I'm the one who hosted the party," I said evenly with a faint smile, and probably the only one who stayed sober that night. The room was too bright, almost sterile. The monitor beeped steadily, counting the seconds of pretense. Crystal's hair was tangled, lips cracked, IV line taped to her arm. When she saw me, she blinked weakly. "Veronica." She rasped it. Tasted bitter, like metal. I set my bag on the chair, tilted my head slightly, and said softly, "Just loud enough for her to hear, sweetheart. That's the taste of bad accounting." Her eyes flickered. She didn't fully grasp my words, but fear doesn't need translation. I took her hand gently, almost kindly, then let it go. "I hope you recover soon," I said, my tone flawless, like something rehearsed for television, "because once you're better, we have a lot to discuss." On the drive home, the cold wind slid through my coat. I drove slowly enough to think not enough to cool the anger. When someone tries to kill you, the real question isn't why. It's how long they've been planning it. How long before they decided your existence no longer yielded profit? The house greeted me with mechanical calm. The cameras blinked. Alexa chimed, "Welcome home, Veronica." "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied. "Show me the kitchen." The screen lit up with familiar stillness. Clean, cold, safe. Then I turned it off and sat at my desk. In front of me lay my old leather briefcase filled with every family financial record. "Old habits die hard," I still wrote by hand. Paper doesn't lie. I opened the ledger and turned the pages. Dates, notes, amounts meticulous. 2014 Ethan, Lily's tuition, $24,000. 2016 house down payment, $60,000. 2018 business venture for Crystal, $42,000. 2020 medical emergency, $18,000. 2022 family advance, $36,000. Total $180,000. Each entry carefully labeled loan, non-repayable in hardship. I remembered every transfer, each paired with a smile and the phrase, "Don't worry, I trust you." Now every trust felt like a hook. I leaned back, closing my eyes. Memories overlapped like old film reels. The first time, Ethan called late at night. "Mom, Lily's tuition payment is stuck. Just for a few weeks." I wired the money the next morning. The second time, Crystal, teary-eyed. "We found our dream home, but we're short on the down payment. I sold a few stocks, sent them $60,000, received a thank you card in return." The third time, an urgent text. "Mom, this is a once-in-a-lifetime business deal. We have to act today." And I believed them. Every time. Those gifts, looking back, were just down payments on inheritance. No one gives without expecting a return. That afternoon, I checked my email from the bank. A new message blinked on screen. "Unusual login attempt detected at 8:14 a.m. IP address registered to Ethan Vale." I froze for a moment, rereading to be sure. Then my phone vibrated another alert. "Sign-in attempt blocked. Please verify." I laughed quietly. The moment you realize your own son is trying to access your accounts, your heart doesn't break. It just restructures. Like a balance sheet, shift the columns and everything looks different. I called my old assistant at the main branch, Martha. "Veronica." "It's been ages," she said. "I know," I replied. "Listen, lock all my online access temporarily, even mine. Transfer temporary authorization to you, and don't tell anyone. "Is everything all right?" she asked. I smiled. "Let's just say it's an audit of family ethics." After hanging up, I pulled out my black notebook, Private Ledger. Embossed in silver on the cover, "Trust is an asset until it isn't." I added a new line, Ethan Vale, attempted access, 8:14 a.m., then closed the book. That evening, Lily sent me a video from the hospital. Crystal lay in bed trying to smile. "Mom, don't worry. The doctors say I'll be fine. It must have been the drink. I'm sorry if I scared you." I paused the video at the 10-second mark. Lily was holding the camera, and in the faint reflection on the IV bottle, I saw her glance sideways as if waiting for someone's signal. I didn't know whether to pity or admire her. If this was a plan, it was meticulously executed. Unfortunately, they forgot I spent a lifetime exposing meticulous plans like theirs. That night, I sat at the dining table under a small lamp. Before me was a list of numbers, and in my mind, the image of Crystal in that hospital bed. I didn't feel satisfaction. What I felt was emptiness, the kind that comes when you finally find the missing error in an annual report, painful yet relieving. I thought of something ironic. I had always told Ethan, "The difference between a gift and a loan is just how you record it." And now I was living proof. I washed my coffee cup and looked into the kitchen mirror. The woman staring back wasn't frail. She was simply done calculating. As I prepared to turn off the lights, my phone buzzed again. A new notification from the bank, new beneficiary request pending approval, submitted by Ethan Vale. I stared at the screen for a long moment. My heart didn't race, it just felt heavier, no doubt remained. That night at the party hadn't been a mistake. It was a test to see whether I was still sharp enough to protect myself. I turned off the phone, locked the door, and whispered into the darkness. "My dear children, if this is a game, I'll play it. But remember, I write the rules." Outside, the wind rattled the fence, dry leaves scraping against it, sounding like the shuffle of old banknotes. I smiled faintly. Sometimes gifts don't kill with poison, they kill with trust. 3 days after the bank warning, I knew someone would show up at my door. When greed is blocked, it doesn't disappear, it finds another way to flow. That morning, I heard a car pull into the driveway. From the kitchen window, I saw Ethan step out first wearing a white shirt and that practiced smile of his. Behind him was Lily holding a stack of glossy brochures. I sighed and took a slow sip of my morning coffee. The guilty usually return with remorse. The scheming return with proposals. Mom, Ethan called brightly, a little too loud. "We brought something for you to look at." "Don't tell me it's more pastries," I replied. "I still haven't finished the first box." They both laughed awkwardly. I let them in. I watched how Lily avoided my eyes while her phone lit up every few seconds. I didn't ask. I just poured more coffee the way you do when you're ready to host guests. Or interrogate them. "We've been worried about you." Ethan began, voice rehearsed with just the right touch of concern. "This house is too big, Mom. It's not safe for you to live alone. Not safe." I raised an eyebrow. "I have 8 cameras, a full alarm system, and a brain that still works." "That's not what we mean," Lily said gently, trying to sound warm. "You should live somewhere with people your age, with care, with friends, activities, you know." I chuckled, voice raspy but amused. "You mean a place with golf, spa days, and weekly tea parties? Sounds more like witness protection than retirement." Ethan forced a laugh. "No, really, Mom, it's a great place. Lily and I went to see it. It's called Sunset Manor." He pulled a thick, shiny brochure from his bag, smiling elderly people playing bingo, cooking, doing yoga outdoors. I flipped through it silently. The pictures were lovely, but what caught my eye was the small number printed in the corner, entrance fee, $380,000. I looked up, tone soft. "Let me guess you two want to offer some financial advice on this plan." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Well, if you think it makes sense, I could help with the paperwork, handle the transfer, just to make it easier." Paperwork. I tilted my head as if recalling something amusing. "Ah, you mean a power of attorney, the kind I helped design a prototype for 15 years ago at the firm Silence." Then I smiled faintly as though it really had been a joke. "Oh, relax. I'm just teasing. My memory's still sharp." Ethan forced another smile. Lily jumped in quickly. There's even a koi pond there. You love koi fish, remember koi? I said lightly. How wonderful. I just hope that pond isn't as deep as the hole I see in your intentions. Lily looked down, pretending to check her phone. I noticed her thumbs move fast, texting. That posture. I'd seen it before on the security footage. I smiled, keeping my voice friendly. Who are you texting Lily, a classmate? She startled a bit. Oh, my mom. Just letting her know you're reviewing the documents. How sweet, I said. These days, people report everything by text, even their plans. Ethan rushed to change the subject. Mom, I know you value your independence, but they have a whole section for retired professionals. You could teach a finance class, give talks, share your experience. It's perfect for you. I laughed softly, the kind of laugh that cuts. How fitting. I was just nearly poisoned, and now I'm being invited to teach personal risk management. Perfect indeed. He flushed, trying to keep his tone calm. Mom, you're overthinking this. I do overthink, I said, evenly. That's why I'm still alive. I stood and pulled a folder from the drawer, a real one containing a blank, lasting power of attorney form. I placed it on the table and slid it toward him. Here. This is the original model I used years ago. If you want me to sign one, fill this out without a single typo. If you manage that, maybe I'll believe you. Ethan smiled weakly. You're still as sharp as ever. No, I said. Sharper. Because back then I did it for work. Now I do it to survive. The room went silent. Lily glanced at her watch, then at her phone again. I pretended not to notice and offered lunch. During the meal, I played the role of the gentle mother. I asked Lily about her studies, praised Ethan for keeping busy. But between bites, I caught the quick glances they exchanged, silent signals like a coded conversation. Something was being staged, and Sunset Manor was just the set dressing. So I asked casually, "What's the monthly maintenance fee there?" Ethan replied instantly. Like a man reading a script about $6,000, but it's cheaper if you pay up front. Up front meaning the full amount. Yes, around $380,000, but it's an investment in safety. I smiled. That's a nice phrase. I've heard it before from insurance salesmen or people trying to acquire assets. Lily forced a laugh. You're taking this too seriously, Mrs. Vale. I'm not serious, I said softly, eyes fixed on her glowing phone screen. I'm just observant. Old habit. As they were leaving, Ethan said, I'll leave the brochure, Mom. Take your time. If you decide I can help you sign everything online, no need to go to the bank. I nodded warmly. How thoughtful. I'll call when I've decided. Ethan kissed my cheek and led Lily to the door. The moment they turned away, she pulled out her phone and typed quickly. The living room camera, still silently recording, captured the message clearly. She's signing soon. When the door closed, I stood still. On the table lay the open brochure turned to the final page, an elderly woman smiling at a sunset over a calm lake. Beneath it, the tagline, "Because you've earned your rest." I read it quietly, then let out a small laugh. Rest, perhaps, but not the way you're hoping. I folded the brochure and slipped it into the Project Champagne folder right beside the video evidence. Every picture, every line, every message being cataloged carefully. If they wanted me to retire, they'd first have to face the truth. And I, as always, would be the final auditor. That night, I sat alone at the dining table sipping a glass of dry white wine. Not champagne, just something clean, crisp and honest. I raised the glass slightly and whispered to myself, "Thank you, my children, for giving me a reason to stay sharper than ever." Outside, the sun sank behind the hills, painting the windows amber. My sunset wasn't a retreat. It was the Sunset Manor they'd never imagined, the place where the truth finally begins to speak. Monday morning, I drove out of the neighborhood. No call to Ethan, no note on the counter. Just a thick folder labeled Project Champagne tucked into my bag and the road stretching west toward the suburbs. A small brass nameplate gleamed at the gate, Darrell Kingston, former judge. Current gardener. A perfect introduction, half truth, half irony. Daryl had once been my late husband's colleague, and after both men retired, he became my closest friend. He used to preside over some of the biggest financial fraud cases in the state. Now he presided over weeds in his rose garden. When I stepped out of the car, I saw him kneeling among the flower bed's gloves caked with soil, back slightly bent, but that smile of his was still as sharp as the blade of justice it once was. "Veronica Vale," he said, voice deep and steady. "How long's it been since you left your laptop?" "Since the day I realized my only son treats power of attorney like a winning lottery ticket," I replied. He chuckled gravelly and amused. "Then you've come to the right place. I may plant flowers now, but I still love digging." Through the law. We sat on his porch surrounded by the scent of mint and coffee. I opened the folder and began tone brisk and professional like I was addressing a board meeting. "Daryl, I need to lock down every asset, rebuild my trusts, both literal and emotional." He nodded, removed his gloves, and pulled a fountain pen from his shirt pocket. "I've already heard some of it," he said. "Martha from the bank called. Told me you froze your online access. I figured that meant something's brewing." "Not brewing," I said. "It's a storm." He tilted his head. "A storm inside or outside the house?" "Both, I think." We started reviewing everything page by page, clause by clause of the old trust I'd created 10 years ago. I read each line the way I used to audit a client's books, searching for hidden weaknesses in myself. "Here," Daryl pointed, "this survivorship clause. If someone claims you're mentally unfit, guardianship automatically transfers to your legal heir." I raised an eyebrow. "And what if that heir is the one fabricating the claim?" He smirked, clearing his throat. "Then we amend it. Add a self-defense clause. If any guardianship petition is filed, the trust freezes automatically and transfers temporarily to a nonprofit you designate." "Excellent," I said, "like planting flood barriers before the rain." Daryl sipped his coffee. "Let's call it legal compost. Anyone who wants your assets will have to dig through 10 layers of legal manure to get there." I laughed softly. "Perfect. I've always believed assets grow best when fertilized with law." We spent the whole morning replanting my financial garden layer by layer: investment portfolios, medical directives, ethical clauses, trust restructuring. He built in what he called digital tripwires, automated alerts that would trigger if anyone filed a guardianship claim or questioned my mental capacity. A notification would go straight to both my lawyer and the state court. "And what about image protection?" I asked. Daryl nodded and opened his laptop. "We'll record a competency declaration video. Think of it as an affidavit with a smile." We set up the camera right there among the roses. I sat upright, hands folded, sunlight catching the edge of my glasses. Today I began, voice calm and clear. "I, Veronica Vale, confirm that I am fully competent, fully aware and fully conscious of the fact that my son and his family are attempting to gain control over my estate." Daryl nodded approvingly, then added, "And this serves as evidence against any future fabricated evaluations." When the recording ended, I asked, "Can I add a closing line?" "What kind of line?" "If they want my assets," I said with a grin, "they can start by doing some gardening." He laughed so hard his shoulders shook. "Veronica, you haven't changed a bit, still mixing humor with hellfire." That afternoon, we moved on to the forensic check. Daryl logged into his old database, cross-referencing my bank records for unusual payments. The screen flickered with rows of numbers: $200, $500, $1, $200 small withdrawals Ethan had once called temporary help. Then suddenly, Daryl stopped. "What's this one?" I leaned over. $2,000. "Payment to Dr. Marcus Heller." I frowned. Not familiar. He typed quickly, searching the registry. "Marcus Heller, psychiatrist, specializes in competency evaluations for the elderly, known for being flexible in his conclusions." I understood instantly. Every syllable of that name sounded like a pre-written verdict. For a moment, I was silent. The windmill in the garden turned lazily, the sound of leaves brushing each other like a whispered reminder to breathe. Finally, I said slow and steady, "So they don't just want the money. They want paperwork that says I'm insane." Daryl's gaze was sharp but kind. "What are you planning to do?" I smiled faintly like a woman talking about dinner plans. "I'll give them what they want." He frowned, meaning I'll show them someone incompetent, just not the way they expect. I'll choose when to play that role. I stood brushing the dust from my coat, glancing at the blooming roses. It's time they learn how it feels to read a falsified report. Rain began as I drove home. Soft at first, then steady tapping against the windshield. I turned on the radio, old jazz mixing with the quiet monologue in my head. For 40 years, I'd audited companies, exposed fraud, traced deceit through ledgers. But this case was different because the ledger was my heart and the forgers carried my last name. By the time I reached home, twilight had fallen. In the kitchen, the camera still blinked softly, green lights pulsing like steady heartbeats. I opened my laptop and connected to the new alert network. A message flashed across the screen. Tripwire activated guardianship filing monitor armed. I touched the keyboard lightly and said calm and deliberate, "Alexa, note this. If they come for my mind, I'll give them a show." "Noted," Alexa replied, her neutral tone echoing through the dark kitchen. I sat back, opened my notebook, and wrote the final line of the day, Dr. Marcus Heller, the man who sells incompetence. Appointment soon. Let's make it unforgettable. Then I closed the book, poured a glass of red wine, and raised it like a toast to myself. "Congratulations, Veronica," I murmured. "You've just begun the final audit of your life, an audit between love and deception." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. Lightning flashed through the window. In its brief glow, I saw my reflection, an old woman, not afraid, only calculating. And sometimes, that's exactly what terrifies people most. Some wars don't need guns, only signatures. The morning after returning from Daryl's house, I called Ethan. His voice burst through the line, overly cheerful. "Mom, I was just about to call you, I know," I said, sipping my tea. "I've been thinking, Ethan, Sunset Manor sounds perfect." There was a pause on the other end, then a rush of excitement. "You really mean that?" "Yes. Quiet place. Koi pond, yoga classes, someone else doing the cleaning. What more could a 69-year-old woman want?" "That's great, Mom. I'll get the paperwork ready. Lily and I can come by tomorrow." "Good. I'll make coffee." I replied, my tone light, like I was preparing to close a deal. When I hung up, my eyes drifted to the corner of the table where the folder Daryl had given me sat waiting. Dummy documents, real paper, real signatures. But every clause inside was fake. If Ethan wanted to trap me with documents this time, the trap would spring the other way. The next morning, they arrived earlier than expected. Lily wore a beige coat, Ethan sunglasses, and a confident smile briefcase in hand. They both had the same kind of grin I'd seen hundreds of times in fraud cases. Too bright, too polite, too empty. "Mom, you look fantastic," Ethan said as he stepped in. "I'm still alive," I replied, "which means your retirement plan hasn't worked yet." They laughed awkwardly, unsure whether I was joking. I invited them to sit. On the table sat a vase of red roses, Daryl's gift that morning, with a note tucked inside, "Play your part. Timing is everything." Ethan opened his briefcase, spreading a neat stack of papers. "Here's the Sunset Manor file," he said gently, "and the power of attorney form. I pre-filled everything so you wouldn't have to tire yourself." "How considerate," I said, pulling my chair closer. "I just need to sign where it's marked right. Yes, right here." I squinted, pretending to struggle with the small print. The real documents Daryl prepared looked nearly identical. Same layout, same fonts, except for one subtle difference, a faint seal in the bottom corner that read, "Kingston and Vale Legal Consultancy," the fictional firm Daryl had created for the draft. I picked up the pen and looked at Ethan. "Did you know if Sunset Manor has karaoke nights?" He blinked, surprised. "Karaoke, maybe." Why I smiled, pressing the pen to the paper. "Because I'd love to sing 'You Don't Own Me.'" Lily laughed softly, not catching the meaning. If she understood what that song stood for, she wouldn't be smiling. I signed a few more spots, deliberately letting the pen linger so the hidden camera could catch the moment clearly. Behind the living room painting, my surveillance camera streamed everything live to Daryl's server. To them, I was the docile mother signing away her autonomy. In reality, I was building evidence. "All done," I said, sliding the folder toward Ethan. He exhaled relief, flooding his face. "Thank you, Mom. You have no idea how much this means." "Oh, I think I do," I said, standing to refill the coffee pot. When I turned back, I caught Lily glancing at her phone, thumbs flying over the screen. For a brief moment, I saw the first line of her message before she flipped the phone face down. "She's signing now. Perfect. Right on schedule." I sat back down, checking my watch casually. "Ethan, where did you say Sunset Manor is again?" "About 20 minutes away. I can drive you there today if you'd like." "Oh, no rush. I like to prepare properly," I said, subtly sliding my phone under the table and typing one word to Daryl ready. It took about 2 minutes. I filled the silence with small talk. "So Lily, you're still at NYU planning to go into finance?" She smiled stiffly. "Maybe, but I prefer working with people." "How nice," I said. "You'll need that skill in court." Ethan chuckled uncertainly, about to speak, when a sudden knock, knock, knock cut through the air. Firm, rhythmic, like a heartbeat in a room gone silent. We all turned toward the door. "Mom, are you expecting someone?" Ethan asked. "No," I replied calmly, "but it seems someone's expecting us." I opened the door. 2 people stood outside dressed in plain clothes, but their eyes gave them away immediately. Detectives. One held up a badge. "Mrs. Veronica Vale, yes. I'm Detective Lena Ortiz, and this is Officer Raymond. We're following up on an anonymous report regarding a suspected poisoning at a party held here." Behind me, Ethan's voice cracked. What are you talking about?" I turned to him, and for the first time I saw genuine fear, not performance. Detective Ortiz continued. "We'll need to speak with you and anyone present that evening." "Of course," I said evenly. "Please come in. Have some coffee. It's fresh." The room filled with the scent of hot coffee and a silence thick enough to slice. Lily sat rigid. Ethan wiped at the sweat gathering at his temples. Ortiz flipped through her notes. "Mrs. Vale, according to the hospital, the victim Crystal Vale. Your daughter-in-law reported that her drink might have been contaminated, though the source is unclear." "How terrible," I said, with just the right touch of sympathy. "I hope she recovers soon." The detective turned a page. "Do you know anyone who might have had a motive?" I pursed my lips, glanced at Ethan, then Lily. "Oh, detective," I said slowly, in finance motives rarely sit where people expect. They usually hide in the fine print. Ortiz frowned. "Can you elaborate?" I shrugged. "Perhaps when my lawyer arrives. He enjoys this part more than I do." Right on cue, the doorbell rang again. Through the glass, I saw Daryl's silhouette, beige coat, black briefcase in hand, punctual like a Swiss clock. Ethan looked around, panic spreading. "Mom, what's going on?" I smiled softly. "Nothing complicated, Ethan. I'm just protecting the only investment that still matters to me, the truth." Detective Ortiz turned as Daryl entered. "And you are Mrs. Vale's attorney," he said firmly, "and I believe she has materials to hand over to the authorities." I nodded, pulled a small USB from the drawer, and placed it on the table. "Everything's in there, videos, timestamps, evidence. If anyone planned a game of deception, it ends today." No one spoke. Ethan looked down at his hands. Lily clutched her phone, her face drained of color. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the curtains. In the dim light, I stood tall, my voice steady and sharp as paper, cutting through silence. "You two always wanted me to sign papers. Well, I've signed them." Then I leaned forward, eyes fixed on my son. "Now it's your turn to sign your statements." The next morning, the Vale residence looked like a courtroom disguised as a kitchen. Coffee cups, clipboards, the low hum of the refrigerator, and 3 detectives seated across my dining table. I had seen many audits in my life, but never one that started with a champagne glass. Detective Nora Lewis arrived late carrying a brown evidence bag and a folder marked Lab Results. She was sharp mid-40s with eyes that didn't blink often. Her tone was calm but surgical. "Mrs. Vale," she began, "we received confirmation from the state lab regarding the substance found in the champagne." The air thinned. Ethan shifted in his seat. Lily clasped her phone like a lifeline. Detective Lewis slid a page across the table. On the top line, printed in black ink, oleander extract. A poisonous plant, decorative, beautiful, deadly. She continued, "It's a neurotoxin. Causes dizziness, convulsions, cardiac failure. The same compound was detected in Mrs. Crystal Vale's bloodstream in trace amounts diluted but consistent with ingestion. Crystal sat in the far corner, pale and trembling, wrapped in a shawl. Her voice cracked. That's why it tasted bitter. Detective Lewis nodded slowly, then she unzipped the evidence bag, setting something small and glassy onto the table. A vial. Clear liquid inside. The same one I saw 2 nights ago on camera in Lily's trembling hand. "This was recovered from your granddaughter's purse," the detective said quietly, along with a napkin that tested positive for the same compound. The silence that followed was thicker than fear. Ethan went rigid. His voice came out as a whisper. "Lily, what is this? I don't know," she stammered. "It wasn't supposed to. I mean..." Her voice cracked into sobs, words tumbling over panic. "It was just a prank. Grandpa said she'd never notice. He said it was harmless." Detective Lewis straightened. Grandpa Lily froze, realizing what she had just said. Ethan's head snapped toward her. "What did you just say?" But she was already crying harder, hands shaking. He said it was a lesson that she always tests people, that she needed to be humbled. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone across the room." Crystal gasped, color draining from her face. "You tried to poison your grandmother." Lily burst out. "It wasn't poison. It was just supposed to make her sick for a bit. I swear it was Grandpa's idea. He said it was time she learned she's not immortal." The room erupted, voices overlapping, detectives stepping forward, the sound of metal cuffs unfastened. Ethan slammed his palm on the table. "You're lying." "My father's dead, detective." Lewis shot him a look. "Dead men don't leave digital transfers. We traced a payment yesterday morning, $2,000 from an account linked to your father's old consulting firm. Recipient Dr. Marcus Heller." Ethan's face drained of color. The name hung in the air like smoke. "Dr. Heller," she continued, "is known for falsifying mental competency evaluations for financial gain. He was scheduled to meet Mrs. Vale next week. She turned her gaze to me. Apparently someone planned to declare you incompetent after your sudden hospitalization once you'd been accidentally poisoned." I let out a slow breath. Years of boardroom meetings had taught me how to keep my pulse steady, while others drowned in their lies. Ethan tried to stand. "This is insane. You're accusing my family of..." Officer Raymond stepped forward, hand on his shoulder. "Sit down, Mr. Vale." Crystal pressed a hand over her mouth, shaking. Her voice trembled. "You said she was confused, Ethan. You said she mixed up passwords and bills. I was protecting her," he shouted back. "No," I said quietly. "You were preparing me." The words landed heavier than a slap. He turned toward me, eyes burning with something between guilt and desperation. "Mom, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said, setting down my cup. "For months I've been the ATM with feelings. You wanted my balance, not my blessing." Detective Lewis cleared her throat. "Mrs. Vale, for the record, when did you first notice something was wrong?" I smiled faintly. 2 detectives, 3 liars, 1 truth. The kind of ratio I'd handled all my life. "For the record," I said, lifting my cup of coffee. The moment my granddaughter's hand trembled over my drink. I took a sip, slow and calm. "In other words, detective," I noticed. The next minutes blurred into chaos. Lily sobbed uncontrollably as Officer Raymond read her rights. Crystal leaned against the counter, whispering, How could you? How could you?" Ethan protested, pacing like a trapped animal. "You can't arrest her. She's just a kid. She's an adult, detective," Lewis said flatly, "and she just confessed on record." They handcuffed Lily gently, but the sound of metal still echoed through the room like a verdict. I sat still, fingers resting lightly on my coffee cup, feeling the warmth travel through porcelain to my skin. The sound of handcuffs, the shuffle of shoes, the clicking of evidence bags, it all became a rhythm, almost musical. Detective Lewis turned back toward me. "Mrs. Vale, you've handled this with remarkable composure." I smiled thinly. Years of experience. When you spend 4 decades balancing other people's lies, you develop steady hands. She closed her folder. "We'll need you to come down to the station later for a formal statement. I'll have an officer drive you." "That's all right," I said. I'll drive myself. My car still knows who owns it." Her lips twitched, half a smile, half respect. Of course. As they led Lily out, the girl turned once tear-streaked face, barely visible through the curtain of her hair. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "I just wanted him to love me." For the first time, I felt something twist in my chest, not pity, not anger, something quieter, sadness for what greed does to love. I said softly, "You can't buy love, Lily, not even with poison." Her shoulders shook and she was gone. The house fell silent again. Ethan sat down heavily, rubbing his temples. He didn't look like a villain now, just a boy who never learned the difference between wanting and taking. He whispered, "Mom, is there any way to fix this?" I looked at him for a long moment. "There's always a way," I said finally, "but first you clean up the mess you made." He lifted his eyes. "And you," I took one last sip of my coffee. "Oh, I'll do what I do best," I said. "Run the numbers, file the paperwork, and make sure every single account balances in full." As the police cars pulled away, their lights fading into the dawn, the house returned to its old stillness. The coffee had gone cold. The champagne flute still stood on the counter, empty but gleaming in the morning light. I looked at it, the glass that was meant to end me, and smiled. Tests are meant to reveal the truth, and this one did. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not because of the air conditioning, because of how silence feels when it's wearing a suit. Weeks had passed since that morning in my kitchen. The detectives, the vials, the tears, they'd all been replaced by lawyers, transcripts, and legal terminology sharp enough to draw blood. I sat behind the plaintiff's table, hands folded neatly, my posture calm but my pulse steady. Years in boardrooms had prepared me for this people lying with confidence, then calling it strategy. The state had charged Lily Vale, age 20, with reckless endangerment and use of a toxic substance. Her father, Ethan Vale, faced financial fraud and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. When the judge read those words aloud, his voice carried the weight of a spreadsheet closing. Lily looked smaller than I remembered, hair pulled back, wrists trembling. Ethan sat beside her in the same navy blazer he wore to his college graduation, but the fabric looked tighter now, worn by guilt instead of time. As the prosecution listed evidence bank transfers, camera footage, the lab results, Lily began to cry again. When they played the recording from my living room, her voice echoed through the chamber. It was just a prank. Grandpa said she'd never notice. Even the clerk looked away. Ethan tried to reach for her hand, but the guard stopped him. For the first time, I saw in his face what I'd been waiting to see for years, remorse that wasn't rehearsed. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up slowly. No theatrics, no tears, just truth. Your Honor. I said I spent 40 years as an auditor. My job was to find what didn't add up, numbers, words, people. What I discovered is that deceit rarely begins with malice. It begins with need, then it grows teeth. The judge nodded, not interrupting. "I love my family," I continued, "but love without boundaries becomes charity, and charity without truth becomes theft. I don't ask for punishment, I ask for accountability." Then I sat down. For the first time in months, I felt the room exhale. The sentences came fast. Lily Vale, 1 year in a juvenile rehabilitation program, counseling required. Ethan Vale, 3 years probation, restitution payments, and a permanent mark on his financial license. The judge looked at me over his glasses. "Mrs. Vale," he said, "you've shown remarkable restraint. Do you wish to address them before we close?" I smiled politely. "No, Your Honor, I believe life will handle the closing statements." He smiled back faintly. Case closed. Outside, reporters shouted questions. "Do you forgive them? Will you press further charges? Is it true your husband's company funded the scheme?" I gave the same answer to all of them. The truth already did the talking. I walked to my car under a gray sky. Rain had started to fall, light and rhythmic. For once, it didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like cleansing. Weeks later, the house was mine again, legally, morally, and spiritually. I replaced the old locks. I sold the marble champagne set. The cameras stayed. I'd grown fond of their quiet loyalty. Peace, however, was trickier. It didn't return automatically with property deeds. Some nights I still woke at 3 a.m., reaching for my phone to check bank alerts. Old reflexes die slow. I missed the sound of family more than I missed their presence. So I tried something ridiculous for a 70-year-old woman who'd survived attempted poisoning and fraud. My profile read, "Retired CFO, loves gardening, jazz, and full legal ownership of her assets." The responses were colorful. One man wrote, "I'm a retired dentist with a yacht and a golden retriever." Another said, "Looking for someone financially stable, sounds like you qualify." I closed the app after 3 days. Too many retired dentists, I told my reflection. Then I laughed for real this time. Healing it, turns out, sounds a lot like laughter that surprises you. One quiet Tuesday, I was pruning roses in the garden when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar but local. I answered on speaker hands still dusty from soil. "Mrs. Vale," a woman's voice asked. "This is Angela from Dr. Heller's office. We noticed you missed your appointment last month. Should we reschedule your competency evaluation?" For a split second, I froze. Then I felt it, the old sharp amusement bubbling up again. "Oh, Angela," I said warmly. "Please tell Dr. Heller that I already passed my competency test." "Oh, well, that's wonderful," she stammered. "Do you want me to update your file?" "Yes," I said, smiling. "And while you're at it, tell him I passed his test too." Click. I hung up before she could answer. That night I opened a bottle of red wine and poured a single glass. On the counter sat an untouched champagne flute, the same one from the party. I held it up to the light, watching reflections dance on the surface. Funny. I murmured how something designed for celebration nearly became a weapon. Then I set it down carefully beside my garden gloves and the small note card Daryl had sent last week. "Justice isn't revenge, it's balance restored." He was right. Balance. That was all I'd ever wanted. Before heading to bed, I wrote in my ledger a habit I'd never broken: assets house restored, savings secured, reputation intact, family fractured but alive, peace in progress. Then under notes, I added one final line. Some accounts can't be closed. They just stop accruing interest. I closed the book, turned off the light, and stood by the window. The garden shimmered faintly under moonlight. The koi pond rippled calm and alive. Somewhere a nightbird called, and for the first time in a long time I felt something simple and unfamiliar, quiet. Not the silence of fear, the silence of peace, earned. Spring arrived like an apology. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings, and for the first time in months, the Vale garden bloomed without tension. I was on my knees in the soil that morning, planting rose vines along the old stone fence. My hands were steady, my breath even. The earth gave way easily, soft, forgiving. Next to me sat a row of small pots. Not ceramic, not clay. They were the same champagne glasses from the party. Some were cracked, others chipped. One still carried a faint golden tint from the night everything changed. I'd filled each with soil, a handful of seeds, and one lesson per stem. Every glass now held life instead of poison. "Grandma," a voice called soft and high. I looked up. Emma, my younger granddaughter, 13. All freckles and quiet intelligence, was standing there in her denim jacket, holding a watering can almost as big as her. She had been staying with me for the past month, helping with the garden after school. Unlike her sister, she didn't talk much, but when she did, she asked questions that mattered. She crouched beside me, eyes landing on the glasses. "Grandma," she said, "why do you keep those broken cups? They look kind of haunted." I smiled, brushing soil from my gloves. "They're not haunted, sweetheart. They're reminders." Of what I picked up one, holding it up to the light. Sunlight caught the hairline cracks, scattering tiny rainbows across my wrist. To remind me, I said that not everything that sparkles is safe to drink. Emma frowned thoughtfully. "Like soda." "Exactly," I said, laughing softly. "Just a little more expensive." She giggled, then poured water over the nearest vine. Her laughter sounded like the spring windlight unburdened. We worked in silence for a while. The koi pond gurgled in the distance, a familiar rhythm. The roses, new and red, looked defiant, like survivors who refused to apologize for blooming again. When Emma wasn't looking, I took a deep breath and let my gaze linger on the garden table nearby. That's where it had all begun, the party, the toast, the switch. I could almost hear the echo of the jazz band, the clinking of glasses the moment Crystal fell. Memory has a way of softening the edges of pain like water rounding off glass. I was no longer angry, just awake. Emma broke the silence. Did you ever forgive them, Grandma, Daddy, and Lily? I paused looking at her at those same Vale eyes, but untainted by greed. Forgiveness is a complicated equation, one with emotional decimals that never quite round up. I forgave them, I said finally, but I didn't forget. Forgetting is how people lose themselves twice. She nodded slowly, as if she understood more than I expected. Will they ever come back here? Maybe, I said. But if they do, they'll knock first. When the last vine was planted, I stood dusting soil from my knees. The garden glowed in late morning sun. Each champagne glass shimmered among the leaves, like a buried relic of another life. Emma ran inside to fetch lemonade. I stayed there looking around the roses, the pond, the bench where Daryl had once joked about legal compost. He'd sent me a card last week. The best revenge is longevity. I'd pinned it to the kitchen corkboard right next to my grocery list. When Emma came back, she carried 2 glasses, one for her, one for me. Not champagne, not wine, just sparkling water. Tiny bubbles rising, catching light. She handed me mine carefully. Don't worry, she said with a teasing grin. No oleander this time. I laughed, genuine and deep. Oh, darling, I trust you. Besides, I keep all the real poison locked in the safe now under lessons learned. She rolled her eyes, then clinked her glass gently against mine. To what are we cheering? She asked. I thought about that for a moment, about everything that had burned and bloomed. To the quiet joy of living well, I said. We both took a sip. The bubbles tickled my throat cold and clean. They tried to poison me with greed. I cured myself with boundaries. The truth is, survival isn't dramatic. It's deliberate. It's remembering where to plant, what to water, and who to stop handing the hose to. I've learned that justice doesn't always arrive in sirens or courtrooms. Sometimes it grows slowly, quietly in a garden where you least expect it. Emma was now sketching the garden on her tablet. I looked at her face, her focus, and thought, this is what legacy looks like. Not money, not property, awareness. If she carries that forward, she'll never have to sit where I did between betrayal and survival. The camera in my mind pans wide roses climbing the fence coy, darting through the water, the glint of sunlight off those old champagne glasses reborn as vessels of growth. Everything poisoned had turned into something beautiful. I took one last sip, holding the glass up toward the invisible audience the same way I'd done at my retirement party. But this time my voice was steady, not ironic. Cheers, I said softly to the quiet joy of living well. The bubbles sparkled in the light, and for a fleeting second the world looked exactly as it should, balanced, peaceful, earned. I smiled, set the glass down among the roses, and turned toward the camera that wasn't there, but always was. If you've ever had to protect yourself from family, I said, tell me where you're watching from. Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about revenge, they're about recovery. Then I looked back at the garden, the champagne garden, and whispered the only truth that still mattered. Boundaries bloom.